Hey, welcome back to the Astrology of Things. I'm your host and certified astrologer, Sheena, and today I'm back with a video where I'm going to use sports astrology to predict the winner of the Super Bowl. So, tomorrow, Sunday, February 9th, 2025, the Super Bowl 59 will be happening at 5:30 p.m. Central Time in New Orleans, Louisiana. So, this is the event chart for the game. And so we'll be using sports astrology to analyze the chart and determine the winner. So I did this last year, and last year we had the Kansas City Chiefs playing the San Francisco 49ers, and I had predicted the Chiefs were going to win the Super Bowl. And I was correct. So I was really happy about that. And if you want to check out that video, I'll link it up above. So, the Super Bowl for tomorrow. Let's look at that chart. All right. So, tomorrow, Super Bowl 59, we have the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Kansas City Chiefs. So, the Kansas City Chiefs has been in the Super Bowl, I think, the past 3 years in a row. But they haven't won every single time. They did win last year, though. So when looking at a event chart for the Super Bowl, we first have to determine uh, which houses rule or which houses belong to each team. And we do that based on who the favored team is versus the underdog. So the favored team to win is the Chiefs. So they're going to have the first house assigned to them and the 10th house assigned to them. And then the underdog, they are going to be represented by the 7th house and the 4th house. So, for the Chiefs, since they are represented by the 1st house and the 10th house, they have two rulers, planetary rulers that we're going to use to represent them. So, the 1st house ruler is the Sun, and the 10th house ruler is Venus. And so we can see right now that the Sun is being controlled by the 7th house. So in sports astrology, if a planet, if the planetary ruler of the 7th or 10th, or sorry, if the planetary ruler of the 4th or 10th house is within the boundaries of the 7th or 4th house, it is said that the planet is controlled by that particular house. But let's say if the Sun was outside of the boundaries of the 7th house, that would mean that the Sun is controlling the house. But that's not the case in this particular chart. So that's one indicator to me that that's not a good sign for the Chiefs. We can also look at their 10th house ruler, Venus. So Venus is applying to Chiron, and Chiron is an asteroid, but it does symbolize deep wounds, deep wounding, or wounds, something that can create emotional pain for an individual or entity. So me seeing this Venus applying to Chiron, I don't think that's a good indicator either for the Chiefs. So let's look at the Eagles side. So The seventh house and fourth house represent the eagles. So in derived houses, technically, this seventh house is the eagle's first house. This fourth house is the eagle's 10th house. So the seventh house is ruled by, in traditional astrology, ruled by Saturn here. And the fourth house is ruled by Mars in traditional astrology. So I keep saying traditional astrology because in sports astrology, it's recommended that you go by traditional rulership. And so that's why I keep mentioning that. Otherwise, these houses would be ruled by different planets. All right, so the fact that the seventh and fourth house ruler are in a trine, they're in an almost exact trine, actually. Mars is in Cancer, Saturn's over here in Pisces. So yeah, an exact trine at 18 degrees. To me, that's a really strong indicator in favor of the Eagles, that there's a harmony and flow between those two houses and planets. So far, I don't think it's looking too good for the Chiefs. So another indicator that we can look at to see who is going to win the Super Bowl, we can take a look at the moon and look at whether the moon is applying or separating from any planets, and also taking a look at the last aspect the moon is making before it goes void of course and before it enters a new zodiac sign. So right now we can see that the moon is at 20 degrees Cancer, and it is separating from Mars. So Mars is the eagle's fourth house ruler. So even though the moon is separating from Mars, Mars is disposited by the moon. So the moon is the director, the moon is the boss. The moon is calling the shots in this dynamic between the moon and Mars. So I think that is a strong indicator pointing toward eagles. And then as far as the last aspect, it depends from what perspective we want to look at this from, whether or not we want to use traditional astrology or modern astrology. But in sports astrology, and according to John Frawley's sports astrology book, he recommends using traditional rulership. So that would mean the last aspect the moon is making before it changes signs would be to Mercury. All right, so even though the moon's last aspect is to Mercury and the sun, it's not necessarily a good indicator for the Chiefs, because the moon is making an inconjunct or a quincunx aspect. And the quincunx aspect indicates a relationship between planets that is awkward. There is misunderstandings. There's no flow between the planets in that aspect. So, being that these planets are closely tied to the Chiefs, I don't think this is a good sign for the Chiefs. And then if we wanted to look at the modern rulership, or if we wanted to include modern rulership into this conversation, The moon's last aspect would be with Neptune over here, and it would be making a trine to Neptune. So Neptune would be the ruler of the 8th house. And Neptune's conjunct the north nodes of fate, and it's in the same sign and is the dispositor of Saturn. So Saturn here is the eagle's first house ruler in traditional astrology. So um, I believe, the moon in a trine aspect to that Neptune is actually a good indicator for the eagles. Another indicator that we can take a look at is the part of fortune. So the part of fortune is not a planet, it's not an asteroid, it's actually a mathematical point in the chart. And why we take a look at the part of fortune in sports astrology is because it is one of the few moving elements in the chart within the short, time span of the actual Super Bowl event. So this is another indicator that we can take a look at. So we'll take a look at the house placement and the aspects it's making, as well as its dispositorship. So we can see over here that visually the part of fortune is in the 5th house, but it's sitting in Capricorn. So being that Capricorn is the 6th house cusp, I consider part of fortune in the 6th house. So the 6th house is a cadent house. It's considered a weak house. So the cadent houses fall into an angle. So just imagine the part of fortune falling into the 7th house. So I think that would give a leg up to the Eagles. But aside from that, we can see part of fortune's at 18 degrees. So there's a lot of 18-degree highlighting happening with Saturn and Mars. So Saturn and Mars are representing the Eagles in this, the Eagles' 1st house and 10th house in this chart. So part of fortune is sextiling Saturn here, and it's opposing Mars here. And then if we want to look at the dispositorship, if we look at the traditional rulership, the part of fortune falls into a dispositor loop where it goes between Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury. That's the continuous loop it goes through. So being that Saturn is the ruler of the Eagle's 1st house, and Mercury is sitting next to the sun, and it's being overtaken by the Eagle's 1st house. I think this is an indicator that the part of fortune is in favor of the Eagles. And then if we want to use modern rulership, the dispositor would be, the final dispositor of part of fortune would be that Neptune. And I discussed Neptune earlier, where if we're including Neptune, it's conjunct the nodes. It's making a loose conjunction with the Eagle's 1st house ruler Saturn, and the moon would be making its last aspect to Neptune before it goes into a new sign. So again, just more indicators that I really think this is going to be in favor of the Eagles. All right, so in summary, based on the following key indicators, the First Lord being in the 7th house, being controlled by the 7th house, Venus, the Chief's 10th house ruler, applying to Chiron, Saturn being in a trine with Mars, Saturn being the Eagle's 1st house ruler, Mars being the Eagle's 10th house ruler, Mars being received by the moon, and the moon's making a last aspect to Neptune. I think the indicators are in favor, more in favor of the Eagles. So I'd say the winner of Super Bowl 59 is the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, and I'll see you guys in the next video.